In this presentation, we're going to discuss Introduction to Documentation. I wanted you to have a little heads up about how to cite sources and the reason why we do this before we have our library orientation this week. So in this presentation, we're going to focus on in-text citations and works cited entries. Now, first of all, the reason we document material that we borrow, and we borrow it through summarizations, through paraphrasing, through direct quotes, and so we have to give credit where credit is due, or else we commit the horrible act of plagiarism. So we don't want to be guilty of that. So in order to avoid plagiarism, we must acknowledge borrowed material in two different ways. One is inside the text, or we call them in-text citations. These are also called parenthetical documentations, and so they are placed pretty much immediately after you borrow some information, and that's someone's words, their idea, or their work, a piece of work. So those are in-text citations. We also document through works cited entries on a works cited page at the end of the document. So your works cited page will generally be the last page of your research document. You might want to get out a writer's reference handbook and turn to pages 388 through 390. Just for some information there. As I've just mentioned, the in-text citations are called parenthetical documentation. And you'll see on 389 there, middle of the page, some information about MLA formatted in-text citations. And you want to provide just enough information in these in-text citations that will lead the reader to the appropriate source on the works cited page. And the reason for this is in case the reader wants to read about the material that you've borrowed, maybe wants to read the whole article. You've struck his interest or her enthusiasm, and the reader wants to go and read a little bit more, or perhaps to get more information and maybe read other works by that author of that information. It could be that a person just wants to check your facts, and so you want to provide just enough information to lead them to the appropriate source on the works cited page. I've given you a couple of basic in-text citations at the bottom of this slide. So you'll see, and in most cases, or many cases, a works cited entry includes the author's last name, a space, and a page number. Or in the case of the Graves in-text citation here, we have a page range. So maybe you summarize some information on all of these pages, but it's maybe one particular section of a chapter or something that you're summarizing. So you would give the page range of this particular material that you borrow. And so that's just a basic in-text citation, and sometimes they get a little bit more complex, and we're going to talk about those in just a moment. When you use a source such as a journal article, sometimes those don't have an author, and so if you don't have an author, then you have to use the next most important piece of information to indicate to the reader which source you've used on your works cited. And so in this case, you'll see the source automatically here in your parenthetical documentation here, your in-text citation. And if you will turn to page 300, or actually, I'm sorry, page 437 in this sample research paper, in that first full paragraph, you'll see how this source is used in the essay. The in-text citation is exactly as I've given it here on this slide. And if you turn over to page 440, you will see that that is the third source listed on the works cited page. Now, automatically is not the all of the title of this article, you'll see that this is just one word, and that's all you need in this case to get the reader to the right source on the works cited page. Okay, because this is an article title and those are placed within quotation marks, you have to include what appropriate information in this in-text citation as it is noted on the works cited page. And you'll see that this source doesn't have page numbers, and so we just don't include them if we don't have them. Sometimes journal articles or websites on online don't have page numbers, and so we don't include them if we don't have them. All right, when we look at the works cited page, this is a list of alphabetized sources, or an alphabetized list of the sources that you actually use in your paper. Now, don't think that every source you look at is going to end up being used. That usually doesn't happen. You have to read through sources, determine if that information helps to support what you're saying. You have to evaluate sources as you read them. Evaluate them. Are they from credible authors, or is the source credible in itself? And so after you've read a little bit, you realize maybe it just doesn't lend the excuse me, the type of credibility, then you would not use it and you would not list it on your works cited. Works cited means you actually cited it or used it in your essay. So that should clarify there. And it is the last page of your document. You're going to use reverse indent, also called a hanging indent format. And if you look at page 440, there is just a perfect example of a works cited entry. You'll see that those sources are alphabetized and they use the reverse indent. So the entries begin on the left alignment, but whatever does not fit on the first line is indented 5 spaces or ½ inch. You can tab once. You can also adjust your indentation. I can show you how to do that in class so that it automatically indents if you have to go to the second line. And then all information is double spaced, and you want to make sure that spacing is corrected on from the get-go so you don't have excessive spacing between your entries. And never, never, never in an MLA formatted works cited, you will never number your entries. They are alphabetized. All right, just a little bit more information about works cited entries. They begin with the author's last name when you have an author. If you don't have an author, then you're going to use, as I mentioned before, the next most important piece of information in that entry. When you have books that you're citing, italicize those book titles. Certainly if you're handwriting, you're going to underline that book title because you can't really italicize when you're handwriting. If you've cited an article from a newspaper or a journal or a magazine, you're going to use quotation marks around that article title. Okay? The journal, the magazine, the newspaper itself will follow the title, and the journal, the newspaper, the magazine title has to be italicized because it's a publication and published independently, if you will, but the article within those works has to be, you differentiate by using quotation marks around the article title. Okay? You want to follow standard capitalization rules for titles. Look through your handbook in the section on capitalization for those rules. Again, all information is double spaced, so make sure you have your spacing set from the get-go. When you're citing a book and you have to provide a city, sometimes on the title page there may be 5 cities listed. You'll use the first city that's given on the title page of that book. Now, when you give when you're using or formatting a works cited entry for a book, And let's say the city, like New York City is the publishing city, that's very well known. It is not necessary to provide the state name. But if you're providing a city that is not well known, then it might be important. Let's say if your book was published in Pittsburgh, Texas, then if you only listed Pittsburgh, the author or the reader, excuse me, is going to automatically assume Pennsylvania because it's a major city. So if the book were published in Pittsburgh, Texas, then you would definitely want to put Pittsburgh, comma, capital T, capital X for clarification. You'd have to also include the publishing date, the year that it's published, and the medium. So if you're citing a book, it's probably going to be in print unless it's an ebook. And so the medium is the format of the source. So if it's a web source, you're going to use web as the medium. If it's a print source, you're going to use print. And so make sure you note those things. And for journal articles, you'll include the pages on which the article is found as part of the works cited entry. And just a little bit more information about works cited. Publisher names also go in there for books, for example, and generally we want to shorten those to just the first part of that publisher name. For example, there's really no need to use HarperCollins Publishers. It's a bit long, and again, the most important part here is Harper. And most of the time the reader is going to know that's the whole publisher name. And again, the works cited entry really provides just enough information for the reader to go and find that source for him or herself. So for the Simon & Schuster Publishing Company, you would just list the name Simon. For those books that are published from a university press, it's a little bit different. And so depending on where the university press is located, that helps to determine where you put the U and the P. So for Oxford University Press, you're going to list Oxford and then abbreviate University Press to UP, so Oxford UP. For the University of Chicago Press, you would cite that as U of Chicago P. So wherever, again, the university press are located, put the U and the P in the proper place. Now, I've given you some examples here of some works cited entries that come from page 440 in your Writer's Reference Handbook. So I've taken the first one from Scott Adams, and you'll see that that's just a very basic, book. Okay, we have Dilbert and the Way of the Weasel. Notice the unimportant words are not capitalized. Notice the punctuation. In most cases, there is a period after every piece of information that goes in a works cited entry. However, after the author's last name, we have a comma, and then after the city, we have a colon. After the publisher, Harper, we have a comma. Those are the exceptions. But in most cases, we have a period after the end. Notice the word print at the end of that source. That indicates that it's a bound copy or a print out of some source. It's a hard copy instead of a web source. Notice the Daniel Tynan example here. Your boss is watching. This is an article title, and it's placed within quotation marks. It comes from the source PC World. Okay? And so you want to make sure that you note that. One thing I did not provide in the previous slides was when you use a web source, because the web sources can change. Let's say you access some information today. Tomorrow that source could be pulled off the web. It could be altered or updated. And so it's important for you to provide two pieces of information for the reader. First of all, if there is a date and the last time this web source was updated. That's very important. Include that. That will be the first date you see here, 6 October 2004. And then it's important for you to provide the date that you access that information, because that information is likely to, could have been changed from someone else is looking at that information. So you want to make sure you have the last date of update, if that's provided. Sometimes that information isn't given, but you have to include the date that you accessed it. Very important for the reader. And again, we see that the medium here is web. And if you look at the last one, this is the last entry on page 440. Michael A. Verispej, inappropriate internet surfing. This is an article in the Industry Week source, a web source, perhaps an online journal. And so we have the information there. 7 February 2000 was the last date that this article was updated. And then we have the medium, web, and the day that this writer accessed the information. So 16 February 2009. Note the format of those dates, a little bit different than how you use for MLA on at the beginning of your paper. So please make note of those things. And refer to this sample research paper throughout your writing of research papers in this class.